Imagine starting a company because you want to play Counter-Strike with your friends. That's
it's
amazing.
it's basically it. It's basically it.
Welcome back to another episode of Open Source Cafe, and today we have a really interesting person here with us, Shimon. Shimon is the CEO and co-founder at Datree. Shimon, thanks a lot for joining us today. Would you like to tell our viewers a little bit more about yourself?
So first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's a great honor and really fun to be here. So my name is Shimon Toltz. I'm 32 years old. I'm based out of Tel Aviv, Israel, the Holy Land. And my background is in DevOps and software development. So I started today. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Datree. We help prevent misconfigurations from reaching production in Kubernetes workloads. But I actually started fairly young. I installed my first Linux when I was 12 years old. It was Red Hat 6, I remember, and I ran to the living room and said, "All right, installed Linux." And my mom looked at me like, "Okay, we will find a cure for this problem later." And I was really, really fascinated by open source and Linux, and read about Richard Stallman and Linus Torvald, and all of the open source movement really fascinated me. So then I wanted my own Linux server, but it was really expensive. So I opened my first company when I was 15, and it was a web hosting company. So I found several other people who wanted to host servers. Back in the day, it was like LAMP servers, LAMP stack, like Linux and MySQL, PHP. When I was 18, I sold the company, and we had more than 300 websites on it. And so it was a great experience that taught me a lot. Firstly, from the technical side, but secondly, then you actually need to work with clients and sell stuff and help them and give support and install their things and help them with their code. So it was really interesting.
This video is sponsored by Datree, a tool that you can use to prevent Kubernetes misconfigurations from reaching production. Using Datree, you can catch misconfigurations in the development phase and set or create policies to receive failure alerts. It's useful for different stages of deployment and helps you measure resource usage by applying mandatory labels to workloads. 10,000 plus engineers are already using Datree. Check out the links in the description below to get started today. Thanks a lot for sharing, Shimon, and that's really fascinating. I'm I have so many amazing questions for you because so rare that I find people doing such great things at from such a younger age. And I'm really fascinated about your story and would like to know more about it. So you started at a relatively young age, like at 12 years old. I don't even remember what I was doing when I was 12. So what motivated you? What was like the motivation, and how did you find out about all these things? Like you mentioned, you started your your first like Linux server, and when you were 12 years old. So where did that spark come from? Who motivated you? Is there a story behind that?
So actually, it was like 15 years ago. And back at the time, it was like the war between Windows and Linux, and Windows was closed and closed source. Now Microsoft, they support open source and they love Linux and everything. And then I stumbled upon it. There were like installation parties where you would come with a computer and you'd install Linux. And this is when I heard about it, and I was like, oh my God, there's like something different. Because for me, a computer was Windows. I didn't know that anything else existed. This was it. And then all of a sudden, I found out about it, and I found out that everything is open source, and it really fascinated me. So I then began installing different distributions of Linux and playing with them and learning more about code. And I don't know, I just really liked it.
Cool. And you mentioned that you started your first company at when you were at the age of 15. Can you tell me a little bit more about with your experience? How different would it be if you were 15, like in 2021, right now, starting a company compared to when you were 15 when you were, and how did you actually started? Where the motivation came from, and how did you kickstart the project and scaled it? You mentioned 3,000 websites were running on it. It's a pretty big number, So how did that happen?
So first of all, I think that today it's actually easier to do it, because back at my time, there was no cloud. The cloud did not exist. and you had to actually buy physical servers and put them in a server rack in an ISP in order to have, fast internet and enough power to actually have it. And actually, when I started it, I did not have the motivation of like, I want to open a company. It was just like I had my, websites that I built, and had some like Counter-Strike gaming servers, and I wanted to have my own Counter-Strike server. And then I said, okay, so if I found some more people who also want to host like servers and Ventrilo servers, like VoIP solutions and TeamSpeak, and today it's different. Today we have like Discord and everything is different. But back then you actually needed to run a Ventrilo server somewhere on a Counter-Strike server, and like to host your website on a computer that at the time it wasn't even split into VMs. I actually physically installed Linux on the server. Back then I installed Gentoo Linux because it was like the most optimized one that you can compile the kernel by yourself, and you can compile all of the different packages to be optimized to your hardware. And I found some people, and I bought like a very simple server for like $1,000, and we put it in. And then I started, getting more and more people, and then I bought another server for like $5,000, and another server, and just started getting more and more and more people to put their websites and VoIP solutions and gaming servers on my servers, and it just happened. I know it's similar to how like my communities happen. I just talk with people, and somehow we built a community. So I don't know, it was unexpected.
Imagine starting a company because you want to play Counter-Strike with your friends. That's amazing.
It's basically it. It's basically it.
Interesting.
Cool.
Yeah. And who was like because as a child, 15 years of age, we don't have like that much independent freedom. Who was like the motivation behind like the support? So you mentioned you bought equipments, and were there like any fundings, or were there like your parents who helped you out, or was it like your friends?
So actually what happened, it was like all bootstrapped. So I had a little bit of money, and me and two of my other friends were like, we put in this like initial $1,000, and we bought the first server. And then as I got more customers, I got more money, and then I bought the new servers. So there was no financial need to take a loan or something like that. It would just buy itself. So there was no need to ask from anyone or anything. But the ISP company, I actually have a funny story about it. It was like an ISP, and they had like a server room with internet connections and everything. And one day they had like an outage in the server farm. And I talked to them, I was like, this is unacceptable. My customers, their websites are down, their gaming servers are down. What is this thing? This is unacceptable. And they're like, hey, we're sorry. You can come. You're invited to come and speak to the head of the data center solutions manager. I'm like, okay, I'll come. And we scheduled the meeting, and then I arrive at the day of the meeting, and then I go up the elevator and I enter it, and there are three people sitting, like a woman and two guys, and they're just shocked. And I walk in, I'm like, hello, my name is Shimon, I'm from the company Sam Hosting, and now let's talk about the outage that you had. And they're like completely in shock. And they're like, they're looking at each other, and they're like, what is this? And I'm like, what is the problem? What is the matter? Like, let's talk about the outage. How can you assure me that this will not happen again? I'm going to transfer to your competitors. This is unacceptable. And they're like, it took them several minutes, but then they're like, they calibrated, and then they're like talking to me in a regular way. So it's a funny story of something that happened.
And I'm sure that would not have been like the first experience in that, or were there like other incidents similar to this, when people realized, okay, for example, when you sold your company, right, when you were 18, I think, did you get like similar reactions?
Yeah, so I got similar reactions when I was like would partner up with other people in other companies, or like I would have this thing where like I would hack for, like do some small hacks in terms of ads. So I would like call some radio station and tell them, here, if you put my ads, I'll like broadcast your radio online using VoIP, because they would only do it on FM. And for them it was like revolutionary. Oh, okay, so anyone would be able to listen to a radio now. Again, this is like 2003 or something, right? And then one time I went to meet them at the radio station, and they're all like, they were like totally in shock, unbelieving. But as long as you come in and like you talk about the things, and at the end it's business, and you really they see that you know what you're talking about, so it's totally fine. And when I sold the company, actually I sold it just to a competitor that was like 7 times larger than my company. And for me, I did not want this as a business for life. I always wanted to be like a software entrepreneur, like what I do today in Datree, where we build the product and it's like a SaaS and you can use it. So I always knew that this is more of my path. And I just like it was my first experience in the IT business, but it was not the career like I wanted for myself. So, all the companies knew one another, and I just sold it to another company, and it went great.
And during that time, I think like there were a lot of hosting companies that were coming in the market, right? And most of them are like being taken over by some of the big ones right now. So what was your how did you what were the challenges that you faced initially? Because you mentioned like you were not thinking about that much about competitors. Then how did you scale your company in that terms? Like why were people choosing, like the ones who were choosing, why were they going with you and not the other competitors?
Yeah, so again, we're talking about like 2003, yes? So it was just word of mouth, and I strive to bring like the best support and the highest quality servers. So I would optimize the Linux, and it would always run like smoothly, and I would never like overpack the servers, because other companies would like shove in a lot of infrastructure onto them, like a lot of services, and then there would be lags and problems. So I would be very high quality, and then people would come. And there were also some advertisements in radios and stuff like that I did, and online forums and chats, and I would give a sponsorship to a very popular Counter-Strike team in Israel, and then they had like the SAM logo, and then everyone watched their games and they knew that it's them. You're really bringing me back in time. Like I haven't talked about this for, I don't know, 10 years now. So this is mainly how I did it. And at some point, I understood that I'm losing a portion of the market. Why? Because I was selling BMW. But some people want to buy, a simple Hyundai or something like that. But I was selling like a super premium product. And then what I did is I opened a subsidiary company that is unrelated to my company and had a different logo and a different branding and a different name. And I hired another kid that ran this company. And this was like the low cost of my initial company. So the main brand was like super high quality, but was more expensive. And the second one was like cheaper and was like more affordable for people, but lower quality.
Yeah. And even though like as the years have gone by, many things might have changed. Even like I'll definitely ask you about this as well. Like, running a company in, let's say, 2021 or starting from ground up. We'll be having those questions. We'll also talk about Datree. And by the way, for people who are watching, if you want to get started with Datree and check out, a little bit more about it, the links are in the description below. And we'll also be doing a hands-on tutorial on it in the part 2 of this session. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and check out the links in the description. But one thing that I think definitely stands out and even is true in today's time is the simplicity and the efficiency that many startups do provide. So you mentioned that many people were choosing, let's say, because of the standard that you were providing, and let's say customer service, for example. There's something I've heard from many other entrepreneurs from the 2000s years, and I think that also holds true like right now. And as the market changes, definitely the tools are changing. Now we have like so many Kubernetes startups that are emerging, for example, which we may not have seen previously because Kubernetes did not exist. But let's talk a little bit more about that. So let's talk about after you sold your first company or whatever. Did you by the way, like I have this random question, did you go to high school or college?
I actually dropped out.
Okay. And when was this? Like, after
When I
how
was
many years
15.
did you drop out? When I
When I
was
was
15. So that
15.
was like, high school, right? Senior year for high school. All right, cool. So what happened after you sold your company, and can you tell us a little bit more about from that time till right now starting Datree?
Yeah. So then I was drafted into the Israeli military because everyone here goes to the army, and I was actually a computer crimes investigator. It was very interesting. I did it for 3 years. Then I worked for a energy company called Better Place, like electrical charging vehicles. And then I worked in the security field at McAfee, which is Intel Security. But actually, before starting the tree, I was working at a company called Iron Source, which IPO'd for $11 billion just recently. And I joined when the company was just 30 people, and I left when we were like 1,000 people. And I was the general manager of the infrastructure software development division. And scaling 400 engineers is a very interesting challenge. And this is actually where I felt a lot of the challenges and pains that we deal with the tree today. So one day there was an incident. Some developer made a misconfiguration and it reached production, and it caused a lot of problems. And Iron Source was born on the cloud. It started on AWS and it was running with microservices, very modern architecture. And there is also, they were giving infrastructure as code responsibilities to developers and empowering developers. They did not want to have like developers and ops and like have a war between them and them just throwing things over the fence. They wanted like to have full responsibility. But on the other hand, as a developer, maybe, I don't know, a Java developer or whatever, you might be the best building engineer, but you're not a Docker expert, you're not a Kubernetes expert, and frankly, how are you to know what are the best practices and that you need to put in, memory limit and liveness probe and readiness probe. So back to the story. So there was a misconfiguration, and it's okay. People make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. I just try to not make them again. And then I was faced with the question of like, how am I supposed to propagate this development standard to 400 engineers in my company? And I was naive. I sent an email. I wrote it in the wiki. I tried to, like, I'm very active within communities. I run the largest AWS community in the world. I'm an AWS community hero. We have more than 8,000 members. So I tried to do a meetup. This is what I know how to do. But as a developer, you can't be expected to get emails that tell you, do this, do that, don't forget this configuration, don't do this misconfiguration. And you just can't remember that. And me and my co-founder, Yar Zilberman, we thought to ourselves, okay, this has to be automated. Like, this can't be manual. And this is what prompted us to actually open the tree, to provide a solution that helps engineers when they write code to put a sort of a guardrails that will help them and automatically scan the code changes that they do. And then it will tell them, hey, Kunal, you forgot to put in a CPU limit here. So your Kubernetes cluster might explode if you run some container that has an issue with it. Or you did not configure labels on your resources, so you will be unable to attribute the cost to them. And here we are today.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for sharing, Shimon, and we'll be like learning more about Datree in the next part. I have a question for you. So you mentioned a little bit more about the communities that you run. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Like, what all communities are you a part of, and what actually motivated you to actually contribute to the community side of things? Because it does require a lot of efforts and time as well, running such a big community and helping people. So what motivated you to get involved in communities?
So actually, it's just like I was in Iron Source and we were running on AWS at 2013, which is like fairly early, 12, 13. And I was just like, who else is running on this cloud? Like, is anyone else using EC2, SQS, S3? I don't know. So I found out another person. I was like, let's meet up and talk about it. And then another person and another person. And then someone told us that he's using this service. Like, okay, maybe you come and tell us about how you use the service. So it's like he put in a small like slideshow, and then we were like 5 people, and he told us like how he was doing it. And then more and more people heard about it, and then we said maybe we do another gathering, and this person will tell us about Redshift or some other service, and it just grew and grew and grew and grew, and we created a meetup group, and there was like huge demand, like everyone just wanted to participate and to be part of it. And so me and other members of the community joined to help. And fast forward to today, I'm an AWS community hero, and we have more than 8,000 members, and we've made more than 100 gatherings, whether it's online or offline. And every year we do like the AWS reInvent recap, and it's great. I've learned so much from it. I've met so many wonderful people. When I opened my company, so many of them were so happy to help me and try out our product and give feedback, and it's just amazing.
And you mentioned you're also involved in the CNCF, right?
Yeah, and it's kind of like almost the same story all over again. Like me and my friends were like, okay, CNCF, like we love Open Policy Agent and Kubernetes, and we started like talking about it, and then we saw that like CNCF created this program, and we could be a chapter in it. So like, let's open a CNCF chapter in Tel Aviv. And Tel Aviv has great tech companies. So we've opened it. And so far we had more than 10 gatherings, and people come in and talk about the architecture and telemetry and collecting logs and running workloads. And the last event that I organized was like the battle of the Kubernetes orchestrators. And it was like Google Cloud, AWS, and Microsoft Azure, and we like did a battle off and talked about like the advantages and disadvantages of each one of them in the different clouds and how you can run Kubernetes on them. So it was great fun.
Awesome. And I have a lot of questions for you from the entrepreneurship point of view. So thanks a lot for sharing. And given your experience, what would you if is there anything you would have done differently when you were starting out? I mean, everything worked out to be great, and all the things that you have learned. But what were there like any challenges that you faced when you started Datree, and knowing what you know right now? Is there anything you would have done differently?
Oh wow, we made a lot of mistakes, a lot of mistakes. But
mistakes are a part, right? It's a very important part of the journey.
Experience is scars and mistakes. This is how you get experience. I think that one of the most important things that I would say, and this is like my mentor from Y Combinator, Michael Seibel, which is the CEO of YC, taught me. He said, like, try to think of the product that you're building and the target audience, and how are they used to buying it, and what is the right go-to-market model, and how different companies in your area, in your like field, are doing it. And we initially started up as a top-down company. So we would talk to customers and do demos and show them the product, and then start a POC document, and then start onboarding them on the platform. And it was always kind of weird to me, because back at OpenSource, I would just, go sign in, try a product, like give it to one of my team leads. He would check it with his developers. They would report back, say like, we love it, let's buy it. And it was just, we would do everything self-service. So this is actually something that especially when COVID started, we were like, okay, listen, we don't want to build a company with a solution for DevOps engineers and developers top down. We want it to be open, and we've adopted the product-led growth methodology, and we actually relaunched our product 4 months ago, and we now have more than 250 companies using it in production. And my advice to you is, number one, check out product-led growth. Number two, especially if you're doing something in the field of developers, DevOps, and so on, make sure that it is self-service, easy to use, and that anyone can just try it. Because, hey, I would never click a button to schedule a demo with anyone. So you shouldn't let people try and do it for your product.
So you mentioned about developers and the CARES ecosystem. It's constantly evolving. So the Datree is, let's say, for example, right, preventing misconfigurations. If I ask you a question like, what other problems do you see developers facing when they're working with Kubernetes apart from misconfigurations? Do you have like any particular any specific things that because Kubernetes is like really big, and there are like good parts to it, and there are also like some overwhelming complex parts to it. So given from your experience with interacting developers, is there any area for improvement where people feel like, okay, this is what I don't like about Kubernetes, for example?
Okay, I'll tell you this. Kubernetes, with any system, I see it like you have two choices. You can either choose flexibility or simplicity. Now, if you choose simplicity, it is simple, but you are limited and you don't have many knobs and switches you can actually pull and change. Kubernetes, by design, has chosen to be flexible. So you have a lot of knobs and switches and configurations and toggles and knobs that you can change. But this also brings the challenge that it is not simple, and it is not easy to get started, and it is hard to master. So I think that for me, going forward in terms of Kubernetes, I hope to see more and more platforms that help simplify the usage of Kubernetes and simplify the onboarding of new people into this ecosystem, because this is de facto the operating system of the cloud. Like, that's it. It's like game over. No matter if you run on-prem, Amazon, Azure, AWS, whatever you run, AWS, CNCF, this is like the common thing. So I think every developer and every DevOps person should strive and learn Kubernetes. It is not easy, but once you get the hang of it, it's a very, very powerful tool.
I just want to add on to that. That's exactly what we're doing here at CIVO as well, simplifying Kubernetes for everyone. If you can literally get your cluster up and running in under 2 minutes, and the UI, we are the people that I have interacted with who use CIVO to run their clusters, they've mentioned the same thing, that it's the UI and it's very simple to get started with. What do you think is apart from the the growth and like working on an exciting product with an exciting team, what have you enjoyed the most about starting your own company, since you have been doing it since you were a kid?
The different
if you could
people's...
only you can only pick one thing, only one thing.
One thing. So I would say that I really enjoyed because you control your own destiny. So you are the main reason for your success and you are the main reason for your failures. Of course, there is the luck algorithm involved, but you have no one else to blame but yourself. And I really love it, in terms of going, and it's the land of opportunity. Like today, opening a company, you have the cloud, you have 1,000 SaaS services, you have free tier in everything you do. You just need to go and do it. So this is something that I really admire and love doing, and like in a way controlling your own destiny. It doesn't mean you do what you want. You have investors, you have customers, you have employees and their families that you're paying them money, and you need to put food on their table. So you have a lot of responsibility over your head. But this is for me.
Yeah, and it's also about like managing the entire company. Like you mentioned, it's also about the team members, and that's totally I totally agree. And just one more question I have for you is, since you already gave a lot of nice tips and advices, it's from the point of view of a leader. So what do you think are the most important qualities when you are the one who is running a company at this scale?
Okay, you need to hire the best people you can. I'm a strong believer in transparency. I think that you need to be transparent, and I always say the things as they are. I don't try to sugarcoat it or anything. I always, put the highest bar for my employees, but I always stand by it as well. So I expect you to excel, but I also need to lead by example from my side. And a final thing, I really believe in like work hard, play hard. So, there is a time to be serious and to execute and to really go and focus on what you're doing. But you also need to remember that when you're climbing this hill, it has to be fun, because if it's not fun, life's too short to not work with fun people and do what you like. And especially, by the way, people of your age, millennials now today, really understand it. They're like, no, man, I want to have fun. I want to enjoy. This is what I'm going to do with my life, like the main thing I do. So I need to enjoy it. I need to be fulfilled, and I need to do it this way.
Wow, that was some really good, insight, especially for the younger folks who are watching and who want to get, started in tech. Just one last question for you, that I have is what's next for Shimon?
So for me, I'm hands-on focusing on the tree. I really enjoy what we're doing. I really believe in the problem space and, helping companies prevent misconfigurations from reaching production. And, doing it on the Kubernetes ecosystem is so fun. And building a company that is bottoms up, self-service. For me, it's like a dream come true. I would never thought building something by developers for developers. This is like the most amazing thing ever. So what's next for me is, to continue growing the company and, hopefully one day to IPO. This is the big dream, and to build a big company that brings value. And the Kubernetes market is huge, and the DevOps world just keeps evolving and continuing. And I really, really enjoy being a part of it. So I hope it just continues.
Nothing but facts. Thanks a lot for sharing, Shimon, and good luck with your IPO and the company, and doing great work. I've used it, and most definitely we'll be having such more conversations. And by the way, folks who want to get started, check out the links in the description. But yeah, thanks a lot for joining, Shimon, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.